One of the hardest things to translate or localize in a game is humor, because very often a joke just can't be translated literally. Every once in a while you get a nice joke that works in one or two languages equally. For instance, the magic card Heated Debate, which of course is a pun on the fact that there's a debate happening and fire, became Hakunetsu suru giron in Japanese, which also means a heated debate, but happens to work because Hakunetsu in Japanese, just like heated in English, can refer to actual fire and the quality of a debate. But overall, it can be quite tricky. And so one thing that is done in humorous games is, instead of worrying about puns or jokes one-to-one, they try to insert humor throughout the entire game. The fact that humor exists and is a key part of the game is more important than specific jokes in a lot of cases. The fact that the game itself is kind of funny is key, and so you can miss a joke somewhere and add in a joke somewhere else. Out of the various games that I've seen in Japanese, one of the consistent best efforts that I've seen to localize humor throughout a game experience is actually in the card game Hearthstone, or Hearthstone in Japanese. So in this video, I'm just going to go through 5 what I think are really excellent examples of this to show you some of the strategies that Japanese localizers are using to make sure that a humorous experience is part of the game in Japanese as well. Now, as I mentioned, not every joke can get translated, and indeed, Japanese translators do just kind of ignore or let a number of jokes slide. The English card Babbling Book, for instance, which is a clear wordplay on the phrase babbling brook, is just oshaberi nahon in Japanese, which is a talkative book. There's no humor there. And likewise, bookworm, which is of course a parody of a bookworm, but this time it's the dragon worm, is just bokuwamu in Japanese, which again isn't really funny unless you know English. But let's look at some cases where the localizers really did go all out. This is going to be organized in no particular order except for number 1, which I think is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. So our first example comes from the card Cutting Class, which is of course a joke on skipping class, and it's a class where people are cutting things, as you can see in the art. For the Japanese, they use this word here, which is not a word. But if you look at the kanji, the first one is the kanji for an axe, the second one is the kanji for a blade, and the third is the kanji for a course or a lecture. And if you read this out loud, even though again it's not a word, it would be read as futoko, which is homophonous with the word not attending school. So they actually got cutting class sort of translated into Japanese, even though cutting is not used in any of the Japanese terms for skipping school. So some really excellent kanji play there to get that one through. The second example that instead uses obscure kanji to localize part of the art humor is in the card Roll the Bones. Now, bones of course in English can mean dice and actual bones, and the card art here shows someone rolling actual bones. But bones don't usually mean dice in Japanese. So the translation used instead is sai wa nagerareta, which is the Japanese localization of Caesar's famous phrase, the die has been cast. However, there are a number of kanji that can be used to write the word dice in Japanese, a number of ways to say dice as well. And one of them, which is not on the Joyo kanji list, I don't recommend you using it, this one. And as you can see, the radical there for that kanji actually means bone. So by using a kanji that has the bone radical in it, they're able to still get that these dice are bones joke through, even if it does involve a bit more literary experience than the English version. Another cool thing that the Japanese localizers do is add jokes where they weren't, to make up for the fact that they couldn't translate some jokes. For instance, there's a card in English called Trog Beast Trainer, which has nothing funny about it in English whatsoever, but in the Japanese version they've actually added a joke in there, changing the name to Torogu, which is just of course a trog, and then Chokyoshi. So normally chokyoshi is a word that just means trainer, but they've changed the kanji from the normal ones you see here to this. It's pronounced the same, but it reads as extremely crazy. So it's an extremely crazy beast trainer, creating humor where there wasn't any in the first place. There are also examples that are used to link two sets together. And again, the Japanese translators sometimes went out of their way to create links that were more obvious than what existed in the English. For instance, there's an English card called Stone Tusk Boar, and a card in the corrupted set called a Dusk Boar, and there's a bit of a tusk-dusk linked rhyme there, but the Japanese goes even further. The original Stone Tusk Boar is just an Ishikiba no Inoshishi, which is literally a stone tusk boar. The new version is also a Ishikiba no Inoshishi, except Inoshishi boar has been completely rewritten as Inoshishi, giving a little extended O sound there, which is not a word, but if you read the kanji individually, become odd power corpse. So creating a little phonetic link to the original card and using kanji in a way that they quote shouldn't to add information onto it and sort of explain the corruption effect. And then finally here we have what I think is the best example, and I hope doesn't let you down, which is the Japanese localization of the card Stitched Tracker. Now in English the Stitched Tracker has one pun, and that is when it attacks it says bear arms, which is, you know, a joke that we've seen many times, the right to bear arms when it's a bear. And indeed, when the Japanese version attacks, it says uchi kudakumare, which is until they are ripped apart, but the pronunciation is altered a bit as uchi kuda kuma de. They put a little pause there intentionally to highlight the word kuma in that phrase. Here you can check it out. Uchi kuda kuma de. But when the card enters the battlefield in English, it just says, this beast will not be tamed. Nothing funny about that whatsoever. In contrast, when it enters in Japanese, it says, training this beast is already quite troublesome, which doesn't sound very funny, but if you listen to how the Japanese audio is done, they have added the various Japanese animal sounds throughout. So the exact phrase is, kono kemono o tenazukeru no wa mou kekkou mendo dabu. But instead of saying it like I just said it, they say mo, so the sound that cows make in place of mo. Kekko becomes kekko, which is from kokekokko, or the sound that roosters make. Mendo has the me extended as mendo, which is the sound that goats make and sheep make. And then the boo at the end is the sound that pigs make. It's not a real sentence final particle, it's just a pig sound. So instead of mo kekko mendo dabu, you get mo kekko mendo dabu. I'm not a voice actor. Let's hear the real thing. So all in all, I hope this little quick journey has shown you that when people say that humor can't be translated or jokes can't be translated, what they're really saying is, I don't have the time to translate. I don't have the time to localize it. Because if you're willing to think outside of the box, as the Hearthstone team does and really deserves credit for, there are ways to make sure that the fact that the game is funny does transmit, but it requires you to think outside the box and maybe even delete some puns for completely new ones, or give up on some puns and then add new ones in new spaces. And this is really why when we talk about the quality of a localization, we have to be looking at the entire product, especially in something like a game like this. I hope you found this interesting, and if you did, let me know, because I would love to talk about more cards that I really, really like. They do a great job, and I'd be happy to highlight it more if that's what you all want to see. Check you out in the next video. Bye.